My name is Leah, and I never thought that at 32, after a decade serving my country in the Marines, I'd find myself cast out and homeless on the coldest night of the year. Every month, for 10 years, I sent a piece of my paycheck home, believing I was weaving a safety net of love and gratitude. I thought when I finally came back, injured and broken, that net would be there to catch me. Instead, my own mother looked at me across the Christmas table and spoke words that left a deeper scar than any piece of shrapnel. "You're a drain on us now. I want you gone." My only hope was a late-night bus to my grandmother's farm, a place that had always been my sanctuary. But as her door creaked open in the dead of night, the words she spoke threatened to destroy the last shred of hope I had left. As I share my journey from heartbreak to healing, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments, and if stories about the strength of the human spirit resonate with you, please subscribe. Growing up, my mother Marlene's love was a currency you had to earn. It was never a gift, always a transaction. "I bought you that dress, so you owe me a spotless house. After all I sacrificed for you, the least you can do is make me proud with perfect grades." My father was a faded photograph in my mind, a kind smile, a warm laugh, gone by the time I was 5. After he left, Marlene's reminders of our resemblance were never compliments. "You have his defiant eyes," she'd say, her voice dripping with resentment, always questioning. The only unconditional love I ever knew was 2 hours away, at my grandmother Clara's farm in rural Ohio. Her home was my refuge. Summers there were filled with the smell of hay and baking bread, a place where I could be a child without any strings attached. As we'd sit on her porch swing, she'd tell me stories, her voice a soothing balm. "Leah, you have a fire in you that no one can put out," she'd say. "Remember that when the world tries to douse your flames." I held on to those words like a lifeline. My younger siblings, Ryan and Sophie, learned to navigate our mother's moods far better than I did. Ryan could sense what Marlene wanted, and become that person instantly. Sophie mastered the art of flattery, telling my mother she looked young enough to be her sister, a comment that always earned her a week of favor. I remained the difficult one, the one who couldn't or wouldn't play the game. By 18, I knew I had to get out. The Marines felt like the perfect escape. Structure, purpose, and a chance to finally win my mother's genuine approval. When I told her I'd enlisted, I saw a flicker of respect in her eyes for the first time. "The military will teach you discipline," she said. It also presented her with a financial opportunity. She spoke of a leaking roof and overdue bills, and before I even left for Paris Island, I promised to send money home. It felt like the right thing to do. Family helps family. Basic training was hell, but it was a straightforward hell. The rules made sense. I excelled, graduating with honors. On my first deployment, I set up an automatic payment to send a large chunk of my pay home each month. On our rare calls, Marlene sounded thrilled. "Everyone at church is so proud of my daughter, the Marine," she'd say. Those words were my fuel through long, lonely nights in foreign countries. I believed I was finally doing something right. Over the years, the financial needs grew. The roof became a kitchen remodel. Sophie needed a car for college. Ryan lost his job and needed help. Each time, I increased the amount, taking on more dangerous assignments for the hazard pay. My visits home were brief and strained. Marlene always had a list of chores for me, and the warmth from our phone calls never seemed to translate in person. But there were small moments, a favorite cake, a quick hug, that I clung to as proof that she loved me. My grandmother saw the truth. "Leah, love shouldn't have a price tag," she'd tell me during my visits to the farm. "You can't buy affection." But I wasn't ready to listen. I believed I wasn't just serving my country. I was earning my place in my family. That belief kept me going for 10 years. It was a beautiful dream, and a devastating lie. My last deployment was supposed to be routine. We were providing security for a supply convoy in a region considered relatively stable. I remember sharing a joke with a young corporal, Martinez, as we scanned the dusty landscape. The blast from the RPG came without warning. A searing flash of light, a sound that ripped the world apart, and then nothing but darkness. I woke up in a field hospital in Germany. Martinez was gone. 3 others were seriously injured. My right leg and lower back were shredded by shrapnel, the nerve damage was extensive, and my femur was shattered. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive, but my career as a Marine was over. The months that followed were a fog of surgeries and agonizing physical therapy, learning to walk again with a cane and a heavy leg brace. But the deepest pain wasn't physical. It was the loss of my career, my purpose, my brothers in arms. During this time, my mother's calls became more frequent, her voice filled with a tenderness I'd never heard. "We're getting your room ready," she said. "The whole town wants to welcome our wounded hero home." I started to believe her. I pictured a homecoming filled with warmth and support. I imagined my mother helping me with my exercises, finally seeing me as more than just a paycheck or a problem. I booked my flight to arrive just before Christmas. "It will be a real celebration," Marlene had promised. The journey home was brutal. Navigating the crowded holiday airports with my cane was exhausting, each step sending fire up my leg. But I pushed on, fueled by the fantasy of the welcome that awaited me. When I landed, my phone was empty. No missed calls. No texts. I had to brush aside the disappointment and call her myself. "Oh, you landed today?" she said, her voice flat. "We're swamped with Christmas prep. Just grab a cab." The $80 cab ride ate into my dwindling savings. The house was covered in garish Christmas lights, but no one came out to greet me. I struggled up the icy walkway alone, the pain in my leg a throbbing, burning agony. Before I could knock, the door flew open. "Were you just gonna stand there letting the cold in?" my mother snapped. In that instant, my fantasy of a warm welcome shattered. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, but it felt cold. "Your old room is an office now," she said, waving a dismissive hand. Ryan set up an air mattress in the corner. I stood in the entryway, leaning on my cane, as my sister Sophie came out of the kitchen. She offered a brief, awkward hug before my mother called her back to check on a pie. Alone, I made the painful climb upstairs. My room was gone, replaced by a desk and filing cabinets. In the corner sat a half-inflated air mattress with a thin, flat pillow. There was no trace of me ever having lived there. I sank onto the mattress, the air hissing out until I was nearly on the floor. 10 years of service, of sacrifice, of sending money home. For this. I told myself to be strong. Maybe things would get better. They didn't. They got much, much worse. That evening, the house filled with relatives for Christmas dinner. The air was loud and festive, but I sat in a corner, isolated by my pain and the invisible wall my family had built around me. It was as if my injury made me a ghost at their celebration, a reminder of a world they didn't want to think about. When my aunt finally spoke to me, it was with pitying discomfort. "So you got hurt, huh? Well, I'm sure the military gives you good benefits, right?" My mother directed me to a chair at the end of the dining table, wedged awkwardly against the wall so my equipment, my cane, wouldn't be in the way. During a prayer thanking God for health and prosperity, no mention was made of service or sacrifice. The conversation revolved around promotions and bonuses. Every time I tried to speak, to share something of my life, I was interrupted or ignored. My mother, at the head of the table, expertly steered the conversation away from me, her subtle dismissals as sharp as any knife. The final straw came with dessert. As I shifted in my cramped seat, a brutal spasm shot through my leg. My hand jerked, and the glass of red wine next to me tipped over, its contents spreading like a bloodstain across my mother's new, pristine white tablecloth. A dead silence fell over the room. "I'm so sorry," I stammered. "It was an accident, my leg." "Your leg," she spat the words. "Your pain. Your service. That's all we've heard for months. Do you think you're the only one with problems? While you were off playing soldier, I was here, dealing with real life." "Playing soldier?" I stared at her, stunned. "Mom, I almost died. And I sent home thousands. Money that barely covered the cost of keeping up this house." She cut me off. "And now you're back, expecting us to drop everything and cater to you. Look at the mess you've made. You're nothing but a drain on us now. A burden I never asked for." Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. The foundation I had spent a decade building, a foundation of love I thought was real, had just turned to dust. "If that's how you feel," I said, my voice shaking as I struggled to my feet, "then I'll leave." "Good," she replied, her voice like ice. "Get out of this house. Go find somewhere else to be broken." No one said a word. Not Ryan, not Sophie, not a single relative who had enjoyed the fruits of my paychecks. They just stared at their plates. As I limped upstairs to get my bag, I could hear the cheerful chatter resume behind me, as if nothing had happened. When I came back down, the stained tablecloth had been removed. No one looked up as I let myself out the front door and into the freezing Christmas night. The cold air was a shock to my system. It was past 9 on Christmas, and I was standing on the street, injured and alone, with less than $200 to my name. The laughter from inside the house was a final, cruel confirmation. I was not wanted. I was not missed. I had just pulled out my phone to search for a bus station when a car pulled over. An elderly man rolled down his window. "Everything all right, miss?" he asked, his face etched with concern. The uniform of the Marines had taught me self-reliance, but I was past that now. "Actually," I said, my voice cracking, "I could really use a ride." The man, George, insisted it was no trouble. He was a widower, just driving around to escape the quiet of his empty house on Christmas. He listened to my story not with pity, but with respect. When he dropped me at the nearly deserted bus station, he refused my money, and instead pressed a $20 bill into my hand. "For your ticket, soldier," he said. "Merry Christmas." A stranger had shown me more kindness than my own family. The last bus heading toward my grandmother's farm was leaving in 15 minutes. It wouldn't take me all the way, but it would get me within 5 miles. As the bus rumbled through the dark countryside, I thought about my real family, my units, the men and women who shared everything, who would take a bullet for each other. They were the ones who had visited me in the hospital, who had called and checked in. Now I was cut off from them, cast out by the family who shared my blood but not my heart. The bus dropped me in a tiny, sleeping town just before midnight. The driver frowned when he saw me. You got someone meeting you? There are no taxis out here this time of night. My heart sank. 5 miles might as well have been 50. Wait here, he said, and walked over to the town's only 24-hour diner. He came back with a woman wiping her hands on an apron. This is Brenda, he said. She owns the place and lives out your way. She can give you a ride when she closes up. Brenda was another angel in the dark. As we drove down the familiar country roads, she shared that her own son was in the Navy. It must be hard, she said, coming home to people who don't get it. Harder when they don't want to, I replied. Her headlights finally illuminated the sign I knew from my childhood. Clara's Orchard and Farm. All are welcome here. I prayed it was still true. A single light glowed from the kitchen window, a small beacon of hope. After Brenda drove away, I stood for a long moment, gathering the last of my strength before making the slow, agonizing walk to the front door. I leaned against the door frame, exhausted and shaking, before I finally knocked. After a long moment, the porch light flickered on. The door opened, and there was my grandmother, looking older, her hair now completely silver. She looked at me, at my cane, at my duffel bag, and her expression hardened into a mask I had never seen before. "Grandma," I started, my voice breaking. She held up a hand, stopping me. Her voice was cold, distant. "I know why you're here," she said. "We don't want you." The words hit me. I staggered back, the last fragments of my heart turning to dust. The final betrayal. I was truly, completely, alone. Just as I was about to collapse, my grandmother's face changed in an instant. The hardness melted away, replaced by fierce, protective love. She lunged forward, grabbing my arms to keep me from falling. "Oh, Leah, my sweet girl, I'm so sorry," she cried, pulling me into a desperate hug. "It was a test. Your mother called hours ago, telling me you'd had some kind of violent breakdown and stolen from her. I knew she was lying, but I had to see your face when I said those words. I had to see the hurt to know for sure." The relief was so immense my legs gave out. She guided me inside, her surprising strength holding me up. "What did that woman do to you?" she demanded. Through sobs, I told her everything. Her face grew darker with every word. When I finished, she was shaking with rage. "My own daughter," she whispered. "I have never been so ashamed." She brought me a glass of water and some pills for the pain. "This is your home now," she said, her voice firm. "For as long as you need it to be. You are not a burden. You are a hero." She took me to the guest room, which, unlike my room at my mother's, was filled with photos of me in my uniform, a quilt and my favorite colors on the bed. "I've kept it ready for you," she said simply. "This has always been your home too." As she tucked me in, she hummed the lullaby she sang to me as a child. For the first time since coming back to the States, I felt safe. I felt home. The next morning began the slow process of healing. Over the following weeks, my grandmother helped me see the lifetime of conditional love that had ruled my decisions. She showed me boxes of the letters I'd sent, each one cherished. We discovered that my mother had used the thousands of dollars I'd sent not for necessities, but for vacations and luxuries. The betrayal stung, but under Clara's guidance, I began to let go of the guilt. Eleanor's community rallied around me. Friends brought meals and drove me to physical therapy. Neighbors shoveled paths in the snow so I could practice walking. They were people who had never met me, but they treated me like family because my grandmother had been telling them stories about her brave Marine granddaughter for years. As winter thawed into spring, I found a new purpose. I began helping on the farm, taking over the finances, and using my military education benefits to study agricultural business online. The physical work was healing, and for the first time, I was making choices for myself, not for someone else's approval. A year after that terrible Christmas, my life was unrecognizable. The farm was thriving. We had started a program for local veterans to come and find peace in the rhythms of the land. My sister Sophie had reached out, and we were slowly, carefully rebuilding our relationship, separate from our mother. Ryan remained distant. One day, my mother's car pulled up the long driveway. She hadn't come to apologize. She'd heard my disability back pay had come through, and she'd come for her share. A year ago, I might have given in, desperate for a crumb of affection. But I was no longer that person. "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "That money is for my future." She stared at me, shocked by my refusal. "After everything I've done for you, Grandma has shown me what real family support looks like," I told her. "It isn't a transaction. I'm happy here. I don't need to buy your approval anymore." She left in a cloud of dust and fury, and as she drove away, I felt nothing but a quiet, profound relief. The injury that I thought was the end of my life was actually the beginning. The rejection that shattered my heart freed me to find what was real. Family isn't about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up when you're at your lowest, who love you without a price tag, and who give you a safe place to heal. It's the people who see the fire in you and help you protect it from the storm. That is the greatest lesson, and the most precious gift I have ever received.